So I guess, one of the things I wanted to post an update about, because I had posted other stuff. Some of the projects I have, in terms of research, I just don't have the resources. Like, mostly I haven't had a job, and so I've had a lot of trouble with income. So, like, even doing like small trips or going to like trying to track down historical societies or something like that for some of the other projects I kind of mentioned in some of my other videos. Those were a few years ago. I haven't really gotten that far with some of them, but I still think about them. And I have other ones. I mean, it's sort of just doing research into um, the local history of this area that encompasses like a lot. Like there's a number of different religious movements, as well as, I mean, there are different time frames as well, like in this part of the world, like into getting into like the Albany area as well. Um, but I haven't got too far with some of that. But in terms of other stuff, like I have also like I'm hoping to do a novel of some kind, um, and put together like some of my life experiences into a novel, which I think might be of interest, to people who um, are interested in sort of more. I guess the way to categorize it would be like esoteric, um, tantric practices in terms of like in an intellectual sense, in terms of sort of a practice, because like mine is very weird, like I have like an affinity for Taoist tradition, old deities and like folklore, as well as like Nepali folklore and like Hindu folklore, Hinduism, and Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Bon Buddhism, a lot of these different these different traditions that you think like, because I'm an outsider to all of this. Like I wasn't born into any of this. It's all stuff that I've learned about, but through some of my travels and experiences, um, it's changed me, and it, in a lot of respects, like there was a psychological thing that happened to me where I developed a much better self-awareness of my mental health and the mental condition. Like I had an unusual life as in a developmental way, and um, probably have like sort of I have a persistent chronic cardiac condition that's been around since I was a kid, and sleep apnea, and I think that was a function of like development at some point. But it's something that like I think like I've mitigated against a lot of it, and a lot of what I've done. Like I've been able to function, but it's been hard having no job. It's pretty difficult to get anywhere with any sort of projects when you don't have any financing or money. So, yeah, like I've even like tried to sell my house, but it doesn't really. It's not a really good equation for me right now. But I'm hoping that something kind of goes somewhere in terms of like some opportunity. We're gonna see what comes up, you know, because things have. There's a lot of things that have changed, and yeah. So I don't want to like make this video about other things that in 3 years I'm going to be talking about, not having really gotten very far with, because I don't have a job. you know, but like the job that I have, I do have a job at the moment, as far as I know. So I believe I have a job at the moment, and that's mostly because I'm just starting it. So I haven't actually like started work, but yeah, I just want to post this because like I have content on here. Like some of it's local history type stuff, and it's mostly, if anything, it would just be me narrating it, because or like if I can get people who would be willing to like talk about stuff and lecture or like present stuff, in sort of a lecture format in terms of local history topics that, when put together, help to flesh out the picture of what life was like in this area. And because I've seen like parts of Massachusetts where I believe there were like megalithic structures, or there was a significant effort to alter the natural terrain at some point. And the problem is that you don't know if that occurred during the period of industrialization. But there's a couple sites where I think like there was something going on, you know, and the difficulty is that a lot of New England was populated rather densely during the colonial period and the 1800s, specifically the 1800s. Like the area around, like there are areas of Vermont now that are basically abandoned, literally, that are national forests that are just full of wildlife mostly, and tourists. Large swaths of Vermont are like that, and but going back 100 years, 150 years, there were 100,000 people living up in there farming and tending to like sheep and cattle and things like that. So that's one of the things to keep in mind because I've seen other people who got kind of into this idea that there is like significant amount of megalithic stuff in New England, and there is, but there's also a lot of stuff from the colonial period that has just been left out, and it's now like out in what looks like forest, but had been farmland 100 years ago, 150 years ago. So, and sort of differentiating that. But one of the things about doing that kind of work is you're exposing vulnerabilities because you can't manage security of some of these sites. So you're introducing people to certain places where they shouldn't be, or that they shouldn't even know about. You know, there are certain types of people that are unscrupulous and just want to make a buck and find something on the ground and sell it, or find an artifact or something, or, you know, at this point, even at like arrowheads and things like that, or guys gotten so scarce, you know, when you try, there was a time when people would find things all over the place, and they're, you know, not so much. So like, that's sort of another part of it. So there's a sort of like dishonesty in presenting stuff, because you'll be disingenuous about not knowing, claiming to know or claiming to present things a certain way, despite knowing about other things that you don't want other people to know about, because you don't want them to exploit it or, you know, damage it. And that's a part of things. Like on a local level, like and you know, that's like mine is a micro thing in terms of that, like preservation, but yeah, so that's something that's played into some of what I've been doing too, in terms of research, because I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing, because somebody else will steal the idea. There was a time like back like 25 years ago when I was really interested in doing a presentation of Sacco and Vanzetti, and in the context of what was going on in 2001 after 9/11, the whole idea of domestic terrorism and the response to it, and how it had been handled in the early 1900s, in which two men who didn't commit weren't guilty of the crime that they were charged with, were executed and were electrocuted in Massachusetts, Sacco and Vanzetti, and that was a worldwide notoriety for that matter. People from around the world protested their imprisonment and their sentence to death, and they were still executed. That happened in Massachusetts, and even the governor of Massachusetts proclaimed that that their names were not to be dishonored in history. That was his proclamation, but he didn't actually exonerate them or give them a pardon, because he didn't want to disrupt the Massachusetts legal system. And it's one of those types of things. It's still very much like the judge in that matter his last name was Thayer, and there's still a Thayer Academy in Braintree, which is the area where the trial was held and all that, the Sacco and Vanzetti matter. Maybe I should do something about Sacco and Vanzetti. I had thought about doing